Hey everyone, Mr. Jeffersonian here. And if you haven't heard about Anchor, let me explain. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. First off, it's free, and who doesn't like that? There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So the call to action is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Howdy everyone, and thank you again for tuning in to the Jeffersonian Tradition. Before we get started, I have a couple of things to go over. For now, the podcast is mostly ad-free, and I sure would like to keep it that way. You can help me out with that by becoming a supporting listener. If you find value in the podcast, there's a link in the show notes page that will enable you to contribute to my work and to help keep the podcast going and keep it light on advertising. Contributions start as low as 99 cents per month, with two other brackets at $4.99 per month or $9.99 per month. If you're not comfortable with a recurring contribution model, I've also set up a Cash App profile for the show. One-time contributions can be sent through Cash App to the show's cash tag, which is $Mr. Jeffersonian, and all of this information will be listed in the show notes page as well. Any contribution amounts help, and thank you in advance to anyone who chooses to pitch in. And if you like the show, then please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for it. We are now available on all major podcast platforms. And to help the show grow, make sure to share it with your friends and family. In other show-related news, if there's a topic you'd like for me to cover, or if you just have general questions for me, I can be contacted at the show's email address, which is mrjeffersonian@outlook.com, or through the show's MeWe group, which is also titled The Jeffersonian Tradition. And if you're not on MeWe yet, then seriously, what are you waiting for? Unlike a certain other social media platform, MeWe respects the right to free speech and offers a privacy bill of rights. So if you'd like to be a member there, then download the MeWe app and search for me at the username Mr. Jeffersonian. The show group is private, so we must be contacts before I can send you the group invite. If you're not familiar with MeWe's platform, contacts are the same as being friends on Facebook. With all of that fun stuff out of the way, let's now turn our attention to the topic for today's episode. All right, so today we have a real treat for the audience. We're going to be interviewing New Hampshire State Representative Mr. Mike Sylvia, who is also a part of the Free State Project. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be on. I'm happy to spread the word about the Free State Project and all the great stuff that's going on here in New Hampshire.
Absolutely, and we're definitely excited to hear about it. So just before we get into the Free State Project itself, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm retired from FedEx now. Worked there for 34 years. I grew up in Rhode Island, moved to New York for a little bit. And when I was in New York, found out about the Free State Project and ended up moving here in 2010.
New York sounds awful. Was it as bad as it sounds?
I was in Ithaca, which is the socialist center of the upstate.
Oh, no. All right. So how long have you been involved with the FSP?
I got lined up with it back in 2006 and found out about it, visited New Hampshire a few times, went to Pork Fest, and eventually in 2010, I made the move.
Awesome. So what exactly is the Free State Project?
So the Free State Project is an idea that was hashed by Jason Sorens back around the turn of the century. And he was trying to think of a way to really move the whole libertarian ball and actually make something happen. So he had this idea. And of course, back then it was like an email chat group that it got started on. So the idea was to get a bunch of people, and he did the calculations. He was into political science, so he figured out that if you find a small state with a low population you could have a pretty significant impact if you had 20,000 people move there and push for liberty. So that was the very beginning. And of course, they looked at a bunch of states, and I didn't know about it at the time, but they discounted Rhode Island pretty quickly. It's a small state, but it's extremely corrupt. So they had, I think there was a list of maybe 13 states: Delaware, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Montana, Wyoming, Alaska. And so when they started out, they decided that after 5,000 people joined the initial idea and signing on to essentially a pledge that we'll pick a state, and when we pick the state and 20,000 people also sign on to the whole thing, they'll all make a move to this state, whichever one was picked. And so they decided at 5,000 signups that would be the time to pick the state, and they had a vote. I think that happened probably in the earlier years, maybe around 2004. They had a vote for the state, and New Hampshire was, there was a lot of people here already participating in the whole idea, and they lobbied pretty hard and had enough folks here that New Hampshire was chosen. We even had an endorsement from the governor back then, Benson. So that was the beginning. And once the state was picked, it's been just a matter of signing up the 20,000 people. And we finally did that in 2016. We made 20,000 signups. And the pledge was to move within 5 years. And we have now gone the 5 years. We don't have 20,000 people who have moved. We've got just over 5,000. But even with the 5,000, even long before the 5,000, we've had an impact here for certainly the decade that I've been here. We've had a lot of stuff going on, so it's been very successful, even with the lesser numbers that actually move here. The people who move early were very motivated or free to move. You know, it's not easy to pick up your life, move away from family, perhaps, and head to another state. So far, I think it's been a great success. There's still more people coming all the time. I'm going to be helping a new mover tomorrow unload a truck.
That's awesome. So obviously, as a Jeffersonian, I love this concept. Now, I'll admit, I thought that y'all may have chosen the wrong state, because to me, the low-hanging fruit would have been a state like Wyoming that only has 500,000 people. I'm glad that you explained how New Hampshire came to be. That definitely makes it a little bit more sensical now that I'm hearing it explained that way. So I'm glad to say it looks like I was wrong. So for you as an individual, what led you down the libertarian path?
It was interesting. The first time I ever heard, I can remember the first time I heard libertarian back in my younger days, back in the early 90s. I was hang gliding, and a friend of mine was talking about libertarianism. I was like, what the heck is that? So that was the first I heard of it. And then when I moved to New York around 2005, I had the time to get involved in, actually, in that socialist center of New York. There was a little libertarian group, and of course the Ron Paul thing was shortly thereafter it was coming up. But I got involved with them. There's a strong little group. There's only a dozen or so regulars, but we did a lot of stuff. What was the old politically homeless outreach Nolan chart? We'd do that in the mall down there in on the park in Ithaca, and it was a lot of fun. That's where I found out about it. That's where I heard about the Free State Project, and then started making my journey out to PorcFest every summer.
All right. So what type of libertarian would you say you are? Anarchist, minarchist, other?
Oh, well, on my suit jacket that I wear to the State House, I've got a voluntarist pin. I guess I would have to say a minarchist. I'm not entirely certain that anarchy is entirely achievable, but once we get to the minimal government, perhaps back to where Jefferson got us started, maybe then we could look at going a little further. But we have a long way to go between here and minarchism.
Oh, most definitely. And definitely, I think the states, and this has been a somewhat prolonged journey for me, but I think the states are really the key to all of this. Myself, I was heavily influenced by Brian McClanahan into coming around to this line of thinking, but I think what you guys are doing are incredible. It sounds like you're probably going to be able to keep the less edgy parts of libertarianism, which is still really good, but you're going to actually be able to apply it through a practical manner and actually achieve some outcomes versus, ranting on the internet in the abstract for 10 hours a day. So that's wonderful. That is wonderful.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we get movers that are, fringy. Occasionally they come, they show up, and we've had, what was the crying Nazi was here, Cantwell. You can't stop them from coming. They show up, and we push out some of the real stray ones. And I guess I need to stop for a second and let you know that the Free State Project is not a political organization. It's really just, in fact, they're a 501c3 now. And they are, the purpose is education and educating folks in the line of smaller government for your people. And so they don't really get involved in politics themselves. Once you move into the state, you are free to do, you're always free to do whatever you want, but they're not going to tell you to run for office. They don't tell you that, what kind of activities you should be pursuing. And a lot of people move here and kind of fade into the woodwork. They go off, do their own thing and live free. But there's others of us who take it a little more seriously about not only freeing ourselves, but freeing others, reducing that big government. So I just need to, clear that up, that the FSP is just, they call it a lot of times the bus that gets us to New Hampshire and gets us active and moving along.
Right, but I would assume with that there's a certain type of people who are going to be drawn to it, and I guess my interpretation of it, and I appreciate you giving me some more clarity on that, but my interpretation just from kind of like doing some cursory reading was, okay, yes, it's not an official political organization, but due to the nature of the people who are kind of targeted by this type of movement, the hope would be that it would have some legislative spillover. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, that's entirely correct, because once you're here, there are other organizations. There's some conservative groups. The 603 Alliance does kind of conservative Republican politics, but a lot of Free State movers put together the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, and the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance does a lot to get good legislation through the State House. They look at all of the coming legislation and decide whether it's good or bad. They give it a rating, and then when those bills come to the floor of the House, they put out a recommendation sheet, the gold standard, and they recommend up or down whether these should be voted for or not. And then at the end of the legislative season, they'll put out a score sheet. In fact, we're going to have this coming Saturday the Liberty Dinner, where they'll give us our ratings and let us know how we did. So they do the work of the political side of things, and they also they're not partisan, although clearly all the good legislation tends to come from the Republicans, but every now and then the Democrats come up with a little bit of liberty, and they'll get on board with marijuana deregulation and that sort of thing. So we've got that group in particular does a lot of the politics. The New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is a great organization.
That's good. Well, that's good to hear. I was not aware of their existence, but I'm glad that there is some sort of coalesced faction that works on that. So with that legislative spillover, I recently saw a post of yours on MeWe where it seems like a local journalist was kind of prognosticating doom and gloom because Free State candidates or people who had come there as a byproduct of that have taken over the state representative house. Is that correct, or House of Representatives?
Yeah, we've got a pretty strong contingent in the House of Representatives. We've got I don't know, probably close to 30 actual free state movers, and then there's a bunch of people. New Hampshire was chosen because it's naturally got a lot of libertarian leanings. So we've got probably another, I'd venture to say, almost 100. Just natural New Hampshire liberty-loving reps that vote the right way. And so with that block, we're up to almost, well, I think we're beyond half of the Republican side of the legislature, which gives us a lot of power. We've got, it is out. It's not a secret. Jason Osborne is the majority leader in the House, and that's a very strong position. And he's free stater. He's doing great stuff. He's actually able to, coalesce folks and pass a budget that has tremendous tax cuts in it. This year we added school choice and a bunch of other good stuff. So we've got the locals are motivated by our activity. We kind of gave them a spark, and I've been in the legislature 10 years now, or my fifth term, so 9 years so far is complete. And the Free State folks in the legislature has grown, steadily, and the influence is proportionally it grows with the folks that are inspired by what we're doing. So it's gotten to a pretty good place where we're really getting stuff done, and the future is bright.
I'm glad to hear that. As far as having the homegrown talent there, because obviously anybody who spreads this sort of idea, we don't want to be looked at as like trying to perform a hostile takeover. But I was just looking at something here while you were telling me this. I was not aware of this. I thought New Hampshire, and I may be wrong on this, I thought New Hampshire was a relatively small state, but it says y'all have 400 members in your state house. Is that right?
That is correct. I believe they say we've got the third largest legislative body. I don't know if that's U.S. or I guess. In any case, yeah, 400 seats in the House of Representatives. We represent about 3,300 people for each seat. It's very easy to become a legislator in New Hampshire. I was drafted in 2012 for the election because there was my town, Belmont, is a Republican town with 2 seats, and there were no Republicans signed up to run. So the filing period had closed, and there's a period where the party can put people on, and they didn't have anyone. And so going into a Republican primary, myself and one of the local folks decided to run, and we just ran a write-in campaign for the primary on the Republican ticket. And, of course, we ran against no one. So we got on in the primary. And, of course, being a very Republican town, when the November election came around, we were both elected. So, I mean, there were a lot of arm twisting to get me to run in the first place. I was like, I didn't move for this, but I decided to go for it, and it's worked out really well.
That's incredible. No, that's truly, that is much more in line with the founder's idea of what constituted good representative government. It's like 10 times better even than what they want it. So that's awesome. Now, as far as the actual populace, so the people who fall under the districts of the more pro-liberty factions of the House, how do they seem to be responding?
So the constituents are happy with us. They seem to be, the establishment folks. They put out the standard line. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. The Republican platform. They talk a lot, but then they don't do. It's been my experience that when you say you're going to do something and you do it, and even if you step on some toes along the way, which I do pretty regularly, the locals don't mind. They'll suck it up because you're doing what you say you're going to do.
That's good. No, I'm glad to hear that. The worst thing that could have happened, at least in my opinion, because this happened, it seems like a couple of years ago in Colorado Springs. You had some people who were running on pretty strong rhetoric, and then the constituents didn't necessarily respond well to it in practice, I guess. And now we have a lot more of like I guess you'd call them establishment Republicans here. But what would you say the outlook is as far as the pro-liberty faction being able to take over the state Senate?
The Senate. The Senate is a problem. We've got Carla Garrick, who was once the president of the Free State Project. She's run twice now for Senate, and I think she's going to be running again a third time. The Senate is much more difficult. That is the heart of the establishment. Even in the Republican Party, they vet their candidates. So if you are a Liberty person, of course, Carla doesn't have to worry too much about a primary because the Democrat in that district is so solid that the Republican Party isn't going to back her down. But it's the Senate is tough. It takes more money to get in the Senate. There are only 24 seats in our Senate, so generally they look at a $100,000 campaign to get in, and it's a 2-year term. You got to run every 2 years. So we did have at one time there was a guy, Jim Forsyth, back. He served before me, probably in 2010 and 2011, 11 and 12. I'm sorry. Back in 2010, the Republicans took the House by an extraordinary number, like 300 Republicans to 100 Democrats. It was a bit of a backlash to the collapsing economy and the excessive spending of the Democrats. And then in 2012, we lost that power, and we haven't had it back yet. But as close as the margin is this year, we got an awful lot done. So Jason Osborne got everybody together and managed to keep the establishment types from going too far off the reservation. So worked out well. But the Senate, it's going to take some more years. And we've got, now we've got a lot of the candidates that have been in the House for a little bit, have the experience, have the name recognition. So there's a chance that we could see more running. It's just that they would have a hard time making a lot of difference in the Senate because it is such a tight body. They are very controlled.
How is your Senate structured? Does it go based like I guess what I'm asking, do your counties have a high level of organization, or is the Senate still split up by district?
So we have 10 counties. They don't do a whole lot, run the nursing home and the jail and court system, more or less. So the Senate districts are, this is a redistricting year. They're divvied up. The standard sort of process of redistricting will go on. It's been fairly balanced over the last 10 years. The Republicans did the redistricting last time. And, the Democrats have had control actually maybe twice. So for 4 years over the last 10. But the Senate is pretty tough. They've got pretty good sized districts depending on where they're at. Our North Country is very spread out. I guess that's the structure of the Senate.
Okay, so the reason I asked that, I had a previous guest on here, and we had a discussion about an effort that she's putting forth in Texas. She's calling it One County, One Vote. And I really think all states right now, regardless if they're controlled predominantly by Republicans, Democrats, whatever, I think every state should look at basically creating some sort of state-level electoral college and giving the counties a lot more say in the processes, and especially like for statewide taxes, statewide candidates like gubernatorial races. I think all that voting should actually be done by county instead of at large, just because I don't know about New Hampshire, but like in Texas, you got a handful of big cities that are starting to go blue. Here in Colorado, you got Denver and Boulder that control pretty much everything. And that's even with Colorado Springs acting as a counterweight. So I'm just kind of curious, what would you think about trying to introduce something like that through the New Hampshire House? Do you think it would have any good prospects?
Boy, they don't like new ideas here. I would say that'd be a bit of a challenge. Not exactly sure. How that would work out. We've got Nashua, Manchester, and Portsmouth are the three big blue cities. Perhaps it would be an interesting thing to float. We also have besides the governor, we've got an executive council that works kind of alongside the governor, and there are 5 members there, and they've got huge districts and very much gerrymandered districts also. So it's an interesting prospect. I'll float it and see what kind of reception it gets.
Well, and I think it's beneficial for either party. If you have a strong Democratic presence in a Republican dominated state, you give them a little bit more say, and vice versa. I mean, really, it's a way to just spread out power, fracture it from being so concentrated in those handfuls of areas. And where I drew the inspiration for that was actually by reading John C. Calhoun when he talks about the idea of a concurrent majority, because it's like, well, hey, yes, obviously, if you're going to have a statewide office, that person needs to run with the interest of the entire state. So I'm originally from Louisiana, and it's gotten to a point down there for gubernatorial races. Louisiana's weird. For federal, they always go Republican, at least in my lifetime. But for the state, it's weird. It's really kind of a toss-up whether or not it's going to be Republican or Democrat. But it's getting to a point down there in state politics where you got New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, and they can basically outvote the rest of the state. And there's a couple of smaller parishes over in northeast Louisiana, but that to me would be something in any state that could be a benefit, because you actually can fracture the power, limit the corruption, at least in theory, but you can fracture the power, spread it out, have true government by the consent of the governed, because you're campaigning on behalf of the whole state, or you're writing legislation on behalf of the whole state and not just the interests of the population centers.
Interesting idea. I'll have to dig into that a little more.
Absolutely. So what would you say, it sounds like maybe the Senate, but what would you say have been the biggest roadblocks faced thus far by the pro-liberty faction in the House?
Roadblocks. Well, yeah, it is the establishment. They really know how to control things. They spin garbage. The media is always out to back up the establishment. It's been an interesting thing over the last year with the whole COVID bit, because it inspired a lot of people to run, and that gave us a lot of motivated people who got elected last fall. There was an organization, Reopen New Hampshire, which was run actually by a former state representative, and he was a free stater. He had a huge mailing list and got out there and got a lot of normal people that just were absolutely outraged at the nonsense that was going on. Our governor has not been the worst, but certainly not the best, and our mask mandates that they had were just full of holes, so there was really no enforcement to it. But yeah, it's it's the standard establishment, and the leftists, getting back to some of the stuff that they write about us. Actually, it works out that sometimes when we're running political campaigns, they'll put out a hate mailer that tells us how horrible the Free State Project people are and all the terrible things we want to do, except the audience that gets that mailer usually looks at it and says, this is pretty good advertisement. So it turns around and they're paying to advertise for us. So we've seen a lot of that. I don't know why they keep doing it, but they do, and we'll just enjoy it. So they can try to be obstacles, but I guess they need to do it a little smarter.
Well, speaking of 2020, how did the state legislature fare in fighting that insanity? I know you said the governor wasn't too bad, but I mean, did y'all what was the outlook, I guess, politically there?
It's mixed. It's all the propaganda campaigns, and unfortunately, we've got the governor buying into it, and he liked having his emergency powers. We were pushing back against the emergency powers, and this probably, with the election last year, New Hampshire was the only state that actually flipped to Republican from Democrat, I believe. And we flipped everything, the House, the Senate, the Executive Council. The only thing that wasn't Democrat before was the governor. And that was because I think back in June of 2020, the Democrats were in control, and they were not going to allow us to vote to reopen things or stop all the nonsense that was going on. So the governor had his emergency orders, a state of emergency declared, and a lot of us Republicans, certainly the Free Staters and some of the the folks that are aligned with us, we were pushing pretty hard to end the state of emergency. So it was good messaging for us, and it helped us in the election. So we were working that, and we keep pushing. There was even we've got some interesting, some of the old stuff from the constitutional stuff, bills of redress and remonstrance. We had folks filing, actually I was involved with filing a remonstrance and essentially saying that the legislature has essentially shut itself down, and we have in our Constitution the right to reform our government, also known as the right to revolution. And so we put out a notice to that and went to the House. It's sitting in the House, and I will forever be in the records of trying to reform our government. They had lost their way. They had given up their Constitution. They were acting against it. So we made a move to end it. Of course, they don't listen to it, so it goes away. But we pushed hard. There was a threat to impeach the governor. Makes headlines, but doesn't get very far. So we're pushing.
Did y'all do anything to officially strip the office of the governor of those types of powers in case something like this happens in the future?
This is one of the problems. The governor has veto power, and we have a fairly slim majority. And of course, the Senate works to protect him also. So it would take getting things through the Senate. So we did actually make some progress this year, because one of the things that is contrary to our Constitution, but they do it anyway. We have a budget that is supposed to be just a budget and not any additional stuff, but there's a trailer bill, HB 2, which has a lot of policy stuff. And if you want the governor to sign a bunch of stuff he doesn't want to sign, you put it in the budget bill, HB 2. So there was a lot of stuff this year packed into the budget that the governor might not have otherwise signed. We've finally got a 24-week ban on abortion. Once a fetus is going the 24 weeks, it's not free to remove. We had great tax cuts. We had school choice stuffed into the budget. We had some of the critical race theory. We've prohibited our government from putting forward that kind of training. So we had a lot of stuff, and of course a watered down state of emergency reform. Not what we want, but we were pushing really hard towards the end of the budget cycle at the very, very end. And we got a promise that the governor will sign a bill that will be put forward next year. I don't like promises from politicians, so I did not vote for the budget that had all that great stuff in it, because I think the governor would have signed on after the fact. But yeah, we're pushing hard for sure, and we're getting a lot of good stuff. So
right, well, and at least y'all tried. So here, I got to give our governor credit where it's due. He kind of held off in exercising any sort of emergency powers longer than a lot of other states, but when he did, you could tell he was not giving it up. And actually, our official state of emergency only ended, I think it was back just maybe mid-May. maybe even the first part of June. And we have a Democratic trifecta here. So, I mean, there was just no hope. I think individual action played a big part in this. I definitely did my part. I refused to wear a mask at all. Starting on January 1st of this year, I figured I had played their games long enough. So I just started refusing to wear a mask. Thankfully, when other people saw me in stores, I was able to see a couple of other people look at me and say, "Oh, he's not wearing a mask," and then they would take theirs off. But yeah, we didn't have a chance. So I'm glad that y'all at least tried.
Yeah, we didn't do too badly. I mean, people were scared out of their minds, so they were wearing masks even if they didn't really have to. I wore one maybe half a dozen times because one for protest and another to go get my teeth cleaned at the dentist. But very few. The supermarkets were fine with it, and I didn't have any problem. The legislature was even, they were supposedly requiring masks, but we had a no mask freedom seat section of our legislature. We were, let's see, in 2020, we were in an ice skating rink at a college for our initial meeting after the election. We were outside on a sport field in December, by the way, and it was 40 degrees outside. Then they moved us into another sports complex that was huge and kind of ridiculous. But once again, we always, they cannot require a legislator to wear a mask. That would not fly in this state. So they never really pushed it.
Good. That's good. So we're going to get into a little bit harder hitting questions now. Is there any of the multitude of the general government's usurpations that the pro-liberty faction has in mind for nullification?
So I don't know if it qualifies entirely for nullification, but one of the things that I've worked on a lot is civil asset forfeiture. And one of the problems right now, in fact, we passed the law in New Hampshire to require a criminal conviction, but there is a nagging little problem called the federal government that has an equitable sharing program, and it's actually preferred by law enforcement because it pays out much better. They get 80%. As opposed to the in-state process, they only get 45% of the cut. So I've been working with the Institute for Justice and working on trying to throttle back how much the cops get to go out and grab money and keep it. And the real problem with that is, they're hitting folks for, under $10,000 for the most part. And so, you're talking about cheap cars, and usually it's cash. And if you have 10 grand taken from you by the federal government, it's not like you're going to hire a lawyer and get it back. It just doesn't work out that way. Economics is a pretty solid law. So we're working on ending that kind of stuff. We did have a bill this past year to restrict local law enforcement from cooperating with the enforcement of executive orders related to gun laws.
Good.
Yeah, well, it was good until the Senate made a little amendment to it, and it became a little questionable. But we'll be back with that one next year. And then some of the local activity. We being near Canada, occasionally you get the immigration and customs agents blocking off. There's one section of the highway that they like to go up and park, shut down, stop traffic and rouse people. It's not a busy highway, but nonetheless they go up there, they do that, and there have been activists out there. They go and let people know if they can, and or film the activities. Those are a couple of the things that come to mind.
That's great to hear, and especially if on the civil asset forfeiture, if we could even take that further and say, look, local law enforcement, you will not aid them. I would be a big fan of that. Big fan.
Yeah, that's an extra step. So currently, our path is to try and at least stop the local stuff and keep it from getting advanced. They have joint task force that work all together, and it's just really a criminal organization, but one that needs to be stopped.
Yes, no, for sure, and that would be, at least in my opinion. I don't know what the local outlook is on the cops, but that would be incredible. Like to have some sort of legislation from the state to say, look, as of right now, this is absolved. If you want to enforce it, it's all on you. So that would be awesome. So also with the civil asset forfeiture, you made a comment that I wanted to touch on. So as far as the payouts, I know that's a big problem. Is there any sort of reform going on as far as maybe restructuring how police are compensated? Specifically, I would be concerned about the pension system that I'm assuming New Hampshire has.
Yeah, no, there wasn't anything like that coming forward. Although we did have this year an attempt to break up qualified immunity, such that the locals towns could be sued if anyone any of their employees violated the constitutional rights of a citizen. Um, it started out good, but then it got a lot of pushback because everyone was afraid that all of a sudden you're going to get lawsuits everywhere. Um, but there was a pretty big interest in it, and it was a bipartisan effort. In fact, Institute for Justice was working on that one also. Those are good folks. They came out and supported that. And one of the good things about that is that one of the real problems is, you can't fire certain government employees. The unions back them up, and it doesn't matter how rotten they are, they can't be fired. But in this bill that we had, it would have allowed the person to be terminated and gotten rid of. So we'll be back with that one again next year too.
Well, and on the public unions, even that pinko FDR didn't think that public employees should be allowed to unionize. So is there, I, I don't know if this is a topic that could be broached up there, but has there been any talk in trying to bust up the public unions?
Not really. No, we did have an attempt at right to work for New Hampshire, and that just didn't make it. We have, there are some Republicans who are, in firefighting and in law enforcement, and they just won't have any part of it. They are tied to their unions, and like you say, the retirement programs are a real problem, waiting to explode. I don't know. I don't know what happens with the retirement programs with all of the printing of trillions at the federal level. Maybe it devalues them, but probably not.
Well, even without the inflation, how would you say is New Hampshire's in okay shape? I mean, for what it is it in okay shape?
As far as retirement for the
Well, so long term solvency for the pension plans.
oh, I think it's in pretty good shape. It's not something I track too closely, but I think it's not bad. But they do need to reform some of the ways that it gets structured. They do need to do some restructuring for the public employees for sure.
So okay, so then it's nothing like what's going on in Illinois. So Illinois, they even before COVID, I mean, for at least like 5 to 10 years before COVID, they started running into some severe issues because they have such a generous payout system, and it's good to hear that New Hampshire's not there, and I would definitely not want them to get to that point. So I don't know. I think pensions are going to be a really big problem here in the next 15 to 20 years, but I mean, we'll see. We don't know what we don't know, but I think it's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And no, I think we're in pretty good shape. And they actually increased the amount that was paid into the retirement system to bring it up a little more, so it's a little more solvent.
That's good, and it's such a frustrating issue for me. So my personal background is actually more so in finance, but it's so frustrating to me because just in terms of the raw mathematics, in almost every case, the individual would actually come out better with a 401k type of program. But like up here, they this was probably about 3 years ago. They introduced a bill that would have transitioned all of our public employees slowly but surely out of a defined benefit plan into a defined contribution plan. And the unions they went on a huge propaganda campaign. The local newspapers went on the huge propaganda campaign. Oh, we got to protect our public workers. They wouldn't even hear it. So, but I think that would be a good transition for any state to make.
Yeah, actually, one of the guys, actually, he might even be the speaker next time around, is very much into that whole financing.
Absolutely. So now, just one other real hard hitting question here, just because now this would be perceived as a kind of a radical question to ask, but are there any people on the state legislature sympathetic with secession?
Nah, nobody is really pushing it in the legislature. Certainly, Carla Garrick has been very much part of it, but she hasn't been elected yet. And who knows? I mean, she could get there. Uh, we're really focusing on fixing New Hampshire, and I think that it's the sort of thing where if we're successful, the success can spread. Maybe it can spread into Maine. Vermont might be a little tricky, although who knows? Maybe they'll drop some of their socialism, but. There is a lot of stuff going on. You see, it's actually memes are out there now all about balkanization of the USA. I don't want to be tied down to Massachusetts, though. That's a really bad thing.
So, and see, I've seen the balkanization comments, and it doesn't have to be that way. So, it's like, look, we can go in peace, and we can still have free trade. There can be treaties set up for mutual defense, but it doesn't have to be a nasty, drawn out conflict like it was from 1861 to 1865. I mean, and that's one thing I'm so happy about the Brexit movement. It showed that it can happen peacefully. Now, I don't know what the status of that is as far as like has the UK officially? Well, actually, no, they did officially withdraw, but I don't know what like the trade treaties and all that look like as of yet. But that to me that gives me a lot of hope because it's like, look, you can do it. Like it can be done. So even if it's not necessarily desirable from a standpoint of like, well, if we break up, I don't want to be stuck with New Hampshire. Or, I'm sorry, not New Hampshire, but Massachusetts. Then, well, hey, leave that one too. So that would be my outlook on it. But with that being said, what do you think about movements like the growing Texit movement down there in Texas?
Well, Texas is big enough to be its own country. They've got the borders, they've got the access to the ocean there, and the Gulf. So they've got their own power grid. They got a lot of stuff going for them. They got oil. That's interesting. It could be a good example. That might be the other example. So I'd certainly be interested in seeing that happen. They probably ought to do it before too many Californians get there. That could screw things. Although I don't know if the good Californians are moving or the bad Californians are moving. We've got some here, some of the good ones. We actually sent one of the people who writes the kind of articles that you had seen on MeWe. Actually went back to California. Got tired of trying to change us. So we like that.
Good. No, so Texas, from what I've heard, I haven't lived there for about 6 years now, but from what I heard from my contacts who still live down there, it's kind of a mixture on what type of Californians they're getting in. Up here, so Colorado was actually, I would say, kind of the precursor to Texas. We got the absolute worst of the worst. So you had Colorado, I didn't know this, but Colorado up until maybe about 10 years ago was actually pretty consistently red. And then starting about 10 years ago when they legalized weed, we became kind of a magnet for people who only cared about that. But you did have some people who brought really, really bad voting tendencies with them, and they've refused to give it up because they, at least for that first wave, they didn't leave because of the policies. They left because, oh, well, look, they have legal weed. And now It's more so, and Texas is experiencing this too, but now we've actually had a lot of technology companies move in here, and you're getting, the techocracy that's moving in, and it's just further and further solidifying it, more so around Denver and Boulder. But there's even a few extremely rural counties in Colorado that go blue, and I've been extremely surprised to see that, because normally the further away you are from the metropolitan areas, the more likely you are to not agree with the politics of that area. So it's been, I don't know, but if you've never seen the documentary Rocky Mountain Heist, I would definitely encourage you to watch that, because the Democrats had a very strong playbook to take this state over, and they've been ruthlessly effective in it.
No, I have not seen that. I'm writing it down. I'll have to take a look at it.
Absolutely. And so we're going to go ahead and move into the wrap-up section here. But if the pro-liberty faction, and specifically on this, I guess it's kind of a multifold question. So on the one hand, again, not a political organization, but if the FSP does achieve its goal of 20,000, are there any plans to try to expand it from there, or will New Hampshire be the only spot?
Wow. So I think the plan has always been to really just set an example. I mean, if we had 20,000 people here, man, I suppose we'd have a little trouble. You get that many people, you're going to disagree amongst your family.
Right.
Maybe the battle would be, minarchy or anarchy. Which way are we going to go? But I think it would serve as an example for, not only other states, but around the world. It can work. And we can work with, voluntary agreements, and we should get there, and we're going to keep going.
Good. Well, is there anything you want to plug for the audience, or do you have any sort of call to action?
Well, the FSP.org is the place to look for FSP, and lots of associated information there. You can see they've got a calendar of all the events that go on throughout the state. There's an amazing list of stuff that's going on that's liberty related. At least probably 2 or 3 events every day. So lots of stuff there. FSP.org.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much again for your time and for coming on the show.
Pleasure. It's great to be here, Mr. Jeffersonian.
All right, folks, that'll do us for today. And please remember, if you found value in the podcast, to consider contributing to the show. You can contribute on a recurring basis through the supporting listener link in the show notes page, or you can make a one-time contribution by using the show's Cash App information, which is also included in that show notes page. Any contribution amount helps, and thank you again to everyone in advance who decides to do so. Also, please consider downloading the MeWe app and joining the show's private group so we can have more sane discussion around historical and current political issues. And all right, with another episode in the books, thank you again for tuning in, and I'll talk to y'all next time.